Let's try a little thought experiment. I want you to imagine you're watching a historical record, but it's from the future. Because in a way, that's what this is. This is the story of the most profound shift in human history, what we now call the Great Transition. It's a look back at how our ancestors went from a world of scarcity to one of true abundance, and in doing so, prepared for everything that came next.
Okay, let's just pause on this for a second, because this quote, it's pretty much the whole story right there. This great transition, it wasn't just about having more stuff. It was about our species, humanity, finally growing up. You know, getting our own house in order before we could play a real part in the cosmic neighborhood.
So to really understand where we ended up, we have to look back. We've got to understand what historians call Day 2 civilization. For thousands of years, all of human society was basically organized around one single, powerful idea: scarcity. The belief that there just wasn't enough to go around. And this wasn't just a fact of life. It was the entire operating system for the planet.
And this is absolutely crucial to get. Scarcity wasn't just a thing that happened. It was a design principle. Our economic and social systems didn't just deal with scarcity, they were built to depend on it. Think about it: industrial labor, competitive markets, resource extraction. For any of those systems to work, you fundamentally need things to be scarce. It's what justifies their very existence.
And this comparison just shows the sheer scale of the leap humanity made. We went from a Day 2 civilization, totally focused on survival, a world of extraction and competition, to a Day 4 civilization, built around flourishing, a world powered by regeneration and cooperation. It was a complete rewrite of the source code for what it even meant to be human.
So, the billion-dollar question: how did we get there? Well, that journey took place in this really turbulent, messy, transitional era we call Day 3, mostly in the early 21st century. And this was the moment when the very foundations of scarcity started to crack. Not because of some grand philosophy, but because our actual capabilities were changing so fast. And then, all of a sudden, the signs were just everywhere. The cost of renewable energy completely collapsed. It became the cheapest power in human history. Automation started doing jobs faster than we could create new ones. And maybe most critically, there was this huge psychological shift. Younger generations just started to reject the old story, that life had to be this brutal, competitive struggle for survival.
Which all led to this really strange paradox. On one hand, we technically had the ability to provide for everyone. But on the other hand, scarcity, poverty, anxiety, it was all still there. And that's when it dawned on everyone. The problem wasn't a lack of resources anymore. The problem was that our operating system, our governments, our economic models, they were built for a world that simply didn't exist any longer.
So what happens when an old system starts to fail under new pressures? Well, a new one has to emerge, right? It rises up out of sheer necessity. And this new system came to be known as the utility economy, an operating system designed not to manage scarcity, but to actually coordinate abundance.
Now, the utility economy wasn't some political theory. It was a practical, structural response to new technology. You see, a lot of new tech created what's called near-zero marginal costs. That just means it costs almost nothing to produce one more of something, like one more unit of solar energy or one more copy of a file. The old market logic just completely falls apart in that reality. So the new logic was simple. The essentials for life, energy, food, water, they became foundational utilities, guaranteed to everyone, just as a basic right of being part of civilization.
And it all kind of clicked together in this amazing reinforcing cycle. Abundant, nearly free energy became the bedrock. That cheap energy then powered automated indoor vertical farms, which made food local and resilient. Those same farms were sustained by decentralized water recycling, guaranteeing water security for everyone. And all of that made it possible to rapidly build high-quality housing using automation. You see, each utility just made the next one possible.
And all these interconnected essentials formed what we called the planetary utility mesh. Once that mesh was in place and survival was basically guaranteed for every single person, the most profound shift of all happened. Human purpose was liberated. The question for a person's life was no longer, how do I survive? But for the first time ever, how do I want to contribute?
Which brings us right back to where we started. This whole massive project, this huge technological and social undertaking, it wasn't just about making life on Earth a little bit better. It was the necessary groundwork for humanity's next chapter, for our role in the galaxy.
So we have to ask the ultimate question, right? What was the whole point? Why go through all that turbulence and transition just to become one stable, unified planet?
Because here's the thing. Abundance was never the actual goal. It was the foundation. You could think of it as the process of a civilization finally maturing. It was like our final exam as a species, learning to manage our own power, care for our own home, and get over our own internal squabbles. It was the moment humanity finally grew up. By making sure everyone had what they needed, the utility economy did something no system in history had ever managed to do. It freed our entire civilization from the gravitational pull of fear. That constant, nagging anxiety about survival had kept us focused inward, on competition, on defense. Ending that fear was the absolute precondition for us to look outward with any real clarity and responsibility.
And that is why it mattered. A species that's trapped by fear and fighting over scraps can't responsibly explore the cosmos. But a mature, stable civilization, it can. The Great Transition was what finally allowed us to turn our eyes to the stars, not as conquerors, but as mentors, for all the younger civilizations that were still to come. The challenges of that era, they weren't roadblocks to a better future. They were the curriculum for it.